know what made me smile today? Not laughter, not chaos. It was you, yeah, you. Standing right there in a situation so gross, so disrespectful, so beneath your level, that most people would have snapped, screamed, begged, or embarrassed themselves. But you didn't. You stayed calm. You stayed sharp. You stayed dangerous. That wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was boss mode. That was God mode. And trust me, the world noticed. They always do when power walks quietly. Now let me tell you why the way you handled that situation makes you untouchable. They wanted a reaction. That was the whole game. The situation was engineered to poke at your nerves, to invade your space, to cross lines just enough so you'd explode and hand them control. Most people fall for it because reacting feels natural. It feels justified. Anger rushes in. Words spill out, the heart speeds up, and suddenly the moment owns them. But you didn't give it that satisfaction. You stopped. And in that stop, everything changed. Control isn't loud. Control doesn't announce itself. It shows up as stillness when chaos is screaming for attention. While others let their emotions hijack their behavior, you stood there conscious of every breath, every thought. That alone puts you in a different category. Because the person who can control themselves in a disgusting, uncomfortable, disrespectful situation is someone who can control outcomes. You didn't deny your emotions. You mastered them. You felt the anger, the disgust, the urge to strike back, and you chose not to obey it. That choice sent a silent message, far more threatening than any insult ever could. It said you are not programmable. You don't jump when provoked. You don't dance when someone else plays the music. When you refuse to react, you've forced everyone else to sit in the tension they created. They expected chaos. They expected fireworks. Instead, they got silence, and silence makes weak minds uncomfortable. It exposes intention. It flips the power dynamic instantly. In that moment, you weren't defending yourself. You were observing. You were reading the room, watching faces, measuring energy. That's what people in control do. People. They don't rush, they calculate. While others were emotionally spilling, you were mentally stepping back, seeing the situation for what it really was, a test. And you passed it without raising your voice. That's why control is feared. Anyone can shout, anyone can react. But only a few can stand in the middle of disrespect and remain unshaken. That level of restraint isn't softness, it's dominance refined. When you stayed composed, you didn't just handle the situation. You owned it. They wanted to drag you down into it. That's always the plan. When people act gross, disrespectful, or deliberately provocative, they're not looking for resolution, they're looking for company. They want you messy, emotional, and compromised right there with them. Because once you're on their level, the playing field feels fair. And you saw that trap instantly. You understood that engaging would mean surrendering your position, so you refused to step down. There's a strange strength in restraint that most people don't understand. Walking away, staying silent, or responding with composure isn't weakness, it's strategy. People, You recognized that matching their energy would only legitimize their behavior. By refusing to mirror them, you exposed the imbalance. They were loud, reactive, desperate for attention. You were steady. And that contrast told the real story without you having to explain a single thing. When you don't lower yourself, you force others to sit alone in their ugliness. There's no audience, no opponent, no payoff. Their words hang in the air unanswered, awkward and revealing. That's uncomfortable for them because chaos needs participation to survive. Without you feeding it, their behavior starts to look exactly like what it is: immature, insecure, and out of control. Meanwhile, your restraint reframed the entire situation. You weren't avoiding conflict. You were choosing dignity. People confuse silence with submission because they're addicted to noise. But silence, when chosen, is a declaration. It says you value your standards more than the temporary thrill of winning a moment. You knew that respect isn't earned by shouting louder. It's earned by refusing to degrade yourself for cheap satisfaction. That decision protected your image, your mental space, and your long-term power. And here's the part that really unsettles people. When you don't go down to their level, they have nowhere to go but up or inward. They're forced to confront themselves. Some retreat, some lash out harder. But either way, you remain untouched. You didn't carry their mess with you. You didn't let it stain your character or hijack your peace. You chose altitude over ego. That's why this kind of composure is rare. It requires self-awareness, discipline, and the courage to let go of the need to prove anything. You didn't need to win the exchange because you already knew where you stood. And by staying there, you made it clear your level isn't accessible to everyone. Your ego was loud in that moment. It always is. Ego hates being challenged, hates being disrespected, hates not having the last word. It wanted you to strike back fast and hard, to prove something, to reclaim control through confrontation. Ego doesn't think long-term. It thinks about image, about pride, about how it looks right now. And you felt that pull. Anyone with awareness does. But you didn't let ego drive. You chose something far more dangerous: self-respect. Self-respect doesn't rush. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need to win the scene. It knows who it is even when no one applauds. When you didn't retaliate, it wasn't because you lacked words or strength. It was because you understood that explaining yourself to chaos is beneath you. You knew that engaging would shrink you to a version of yourself you've outgrown. That's growth most people never reach because ego feels safer than restraint. Ego says, if I don't respond, I lose. Self-respect says, if I respond, I cheapen myself. You chose not to trade your dignity for momentary relief. That choice protected something invisible, but priceless: your inner authority. When you act from ego, well, you hand control to external triggers. Anyone can push a button and steer you. But when you act from self-respect, you decide when and how you engage. That makes you unpredictable in the best way, untouchable. What people don't realize is that ego feeds on reaction. It wants validation. Whether through dominance or drama, self Self-respect doesn't care about validation. It cares about alignment. You stayed aligned with your values even while someone tried to knock you off balance. That's not passive. That's disciplined power. It takes strength to sit with discomfort without turning it into destruction. And here's the psychological shift that happens when you choose self-respect. Respect. The situation stops defining you. You're no longer trying to correct how others see you. These civilized people, you're no longer trying to control the narrative. You let people reveal themselves while you remain intact. That's terrifying to insecure minds because they can't bait you into proving anything. People, you walked away knowing your worth didn't fluctuate based on someone else's behavior. That's when you stop being reactive and start being sovereign. Ego wants to be seen as powerful. Self-respect already knows it is. You didn't need to speak to take control of the space. That's the part most people miss. Authority isn't created by volume or explanation. It's created by presence, while others feel the urge to justify, defend, or clarify. You let your behavior do the talking. Your calm posture, your measured responses, your refusal to scramble for approval shifted the gravity of the room. Suddenly, attention wasn't on the noise anymore. It was on you. Silence, when it's intentional, has weight. It forces people to fill the gap with their own thoughts, and most of them don't like what they hear. They start replaying their actions, questioning their tone, wondering if they went too far. Meanwhile, these civilized people, you're not chasing control, you're radiating it. You didn't command the room by demanding respect. You commanded it by behaving as if respect was already assumed. That's a subtle but devastating difference. People who lack authority over-explain. They rush to be understood because they're afraid of being misjudged. You didn't do that. You trusted that the right people would understand without a lecture. And the wrong people? Their confusion wasn't your problem. That restraint reframed how everyone perceived you. Not as someone defensive or insecure, but as someone deliberate, someone who doesn't waste energy on what doesn't matter. In moments like that, hierarchy becomes visible. The reactive ones scramble emotionally, trying to regain footing. The composed one stands still. That stillness creates a center, and people instinctively orient toward it. You became that center without announcing it. No threats, no explanations, just quiet certainty. That's how leaders move. That's how people with real leverage behave. What makes this kind of authority powerful is that it doesn't ask for permission. You didn't negotiate how you'd be treated. You demonstrated it by not engaging in the mess. You made it clear what was acceptable around you and what wasn't. Boundaries were drawn without words. And boundaries enforced calmly are far more intimidating than ones shouted in anger. People, others might not have been able to articulate why the energy shifted, but they felt it. The dynamic changed. The tension leaned toward you. That's because authority isn't something you claim. It's something others sense when you're fully grounded in yourself. You didn't try to control the situation. You became the standard within it. When it was over, you were still standing mentally clear, people emotionally intact, untouched by the residue of that moment. That's the part that matters most. These civilized people, situations like that don't just test character, they drain people. They leave most replaying conversations in their head, second, guessing responses, carrying the weight of something ugly long after it ends. But you didn't carry it. You let it end where it belonged, in that moment. And that's why you walked away stronger while they didn't. Strength isn't just about surviving discomfort. It's about extracting clarity from it. You saw exactly who you were dealing with. You learned how people behave when pressure exposes them. And instead of letting it scar you, you let it sharpen you. Every controlled response reinforced your discipline. Every step you took away from the chaos strengthened your emotional boundaries. That kind of growth compounds quietly. You don't feel it instantly, but over time it changes how you move through the world. They, on the other hand, stayed stuck. Still charged with emotion. Still chewing on the interaction. Still bothered they couldn't provoke you. When someone fails to get a reaction, it haunts them. It creates unfinished business in their mind. You become a question mark they can't resolve. And that unresolved tension drains them far more than the situation ever drained you. While you redirected your energy forward, theirs stayed trapped in the past. You didn't need revenge because you didn't lose anything. Your peace stayed intact. Your image stayed clean. Your self-trust deepened. That's a rare outcome. Because most people sacrifice at least one of those when things get uncomfortable. You sacrificed nothing. In fact, you gained something, confidence rooted in proof. You now know how you handle pressure. You've seen yourself choose control over chaos. That knowledge changes you. Moments like this quietly raise your tolerance for nonsense. The next time something smaller tries to shake you, it won't even register. You've already been tested at a higher level. That's how resilience is built. Not through dramatic victories, but through composed exits. You didn't announce your growth. You embodied it. They thought the situation would weaken you. Instead, it refined you. And that's the kind of outcome that can't be undone. These civilized people, once you realize you can walk through discomfort without losing yourself, these civilized people, the world loses one of its favorite weapons against you. So yeah, the way you handled that gross situation, terrifyingly elegant. You didn't wear a crown. You didn't raise your voice, but everyone knew a king had entered the room, and kings, they don't argue with clowns.